Hello and welcome to Sleep Cove, the podcast and YouTube channel to get a great night's sleep. This episode is the continuation of some Viking and Norse myths, including Odin Goes Wandering. I hope you enjoy it. Please listen in a place where you can safely go to sleep. This recording does not have any music in the background. If you prefer your bedtime stories with some relaxing music, please check out the video in the link in the top pinned comment. And let's begin. Heimdall and little Hanessa, how all things came to be. Hanessa, the child of Freya and the lost Odor, was the youngest of all the dwellers in Asgard. And because it had been prophesied that the child would bring her father and her mother together, little Hanessa was often taken without the city of gods to stand by Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, so she might greet great Odin if his steps turned towards Asgard. In all the palaces of the city of the gods, little Hanessa was made welcome. In Frenzelir, the halls of the mists, where Frigga, the wife of Odin, All-Father, sat spinning with golden threads. In Breidablik, where Baldur, the well-beloved, lived with his fair wife, the young Nanna. In Bilskirnir, the winding house, where Thor and Sif lived. And in Odin's own place, Valistjarf, that was all roofed over with silver shields. The greatest of all the palaces was Gladsheim, that was built by the golden-leaved wood Glasir. Here the banquets of the gods were held. Often little Hanessa looked within and saw Odin, All-Father, seated at the banquet table, with a mantle of blue over him and a shining helmet shaped like an eagle upon his head. Odin would sit there, not eating at all, but drinking the wine of the gods, and taking the food off the table and giving it to Jerry and Freki, the two wolves that crouched beside his seat. She loved to go outside the great gate and stay beside Heimdall, the warder of the rainbow bridge. There, when there was no one crossing, that she might watch, she would sit beside Heimdall and listen to the wonders that he spoke of. Heimdall held in his hands the horn that was called liable. He would sound it to let the dwellers in Asgard know that one was crossing the rainbow bridge, and Heimdall told little Hanessa how he had trained himself to hear the grasses grow, and how he could see all around for 100 miles. He could see in the night as well as the day. He never slept. He had 9 mothers, he told Hanessa, and he fed on the strength of the earth and the cold sea. As she sat beside him day after day, Heimdall would tell little Hanessa how all things began. He had lived from the beginning of time, and he knew all things. Before Asgard was built, he said, and before Odin lived, earth and sea and sky were all mixed together. What was then was the chasms of chasms, and in the north there was Niflheim and the palace of the deadly cold. In the south there was Mufflehelm, the land of fire. In Niflheim there was a cauldron called Havilgamur, that poured out 12 rivers that flowed into the chasms of chasms. Janungagap, the chasms of chasms filled up with ice, for the waters of the rivers froze as they poured into it. From Muspelhelm came clouds of fire that turned the ice into thick mists. The mists fell down again in drops of dew, and from these drops were formed Ymir the ancient giant. Ymir the ancient giant travelled along by the 12 rivers until he came to where another living form was standing in the mists. This was a giant cow. Udhamla was the name of the cow. Ymir lay down beside her and drank her milk, and on the milk she gave him, he lived. Other beings were formed out of the dew that fell to the ground. They were the daughters of the frost, and Ymir the ancient giant married one, and their children were the giants. One day Ymir saw Udhamla breathe upon a cliff of ice and lick with her tongue the place she breathed on. As her tongue went over and over the place, he saw that a figure was being formed. It was not like a giant's form. It was more shapely and more beautiful. A head appeared in the cliff and a golden hair fell over the ice. As Ymir looked upon the being that was being formed, he hated him for his beauty. Udhamla, the giant cow, went on licking the place where she had breathed. At last a man completely formed stepped from the cliff. Ymir the giant hated him so much that he would have slain him then and there. But he knew that if he did, the cow would feed him no more with her milk. Bur was the name of the man who was formed in the ice cliff. Bur, the first of the heroes, he lived too on the milk of the cow. He married a daughter of the ancient giant, and he had a son. But Ymir and Ymir's son hated Bur, and the time came at last when they were able to kill him. And now there was a war between Ymir and Ymir's sons, and the sons and sons of Bur. And Odin was the son of Bur's son. Odin brought all his brothers together, and they were able to destroy Ymir and all his brood, all except one. So huge was Ymir that when he was slain, his blood poured out in such a mighty flood that his sons were all drowned in it, except Bur-Jamil, who was in a boat with his wife when the flood came, and who floated away on the flood to the place that is now called Jotunheim, the realm of the giants. Now Odin and his sons took the body of Ymir, the vastest body that ever was, and they flung it into the chasm of chasms, filling up all the hollow places with it. They dug the bones out of the body, and they piled them up as mountains. They took the teeth, and they made them into rocks, and they took the hair of Ymir, and they made it into the forest of the trees. They took his eyebrows and formed them into the place where men now dwell, Midgard, and out of Ymir's hollow skull they made the sky. And Odin and his sons and the brothers did more than this. They took the sparks and the clouds of flame that blew from Muspelheim, and they made them into the sky and the moon, and all the stars that were in the sky. Odin found a dusky giantess named Night, whose son was called Day, and he gave both of them horses to drive across the sky. Night drove a horse that is named Himfax, Frosty Mane, and Day drove a horse that is called Skinfax, Shining Mane. From Himfax's bit fall the drops that make the dew upon the earth. Then Odin and his sons made a race of men and women and gave them Midgard to live in. Ugly dwarfs had grown up and had spread themselves over the earth. These Odin made go live in the hollow places beneath the earth. The elves he let stay on the earth, but he gave them the tasks of tending the streams and the grasses and the flowers, and with the Vanir he made peace after a war that had been waged, taking Njord from them for a hostage. Bilgemir the giant, who escaped drowning in Ymir's blood, had sons and daughters in Jotunheim. They hated Odin and his sons and strove against them. When Odin lightened up the world with the sun and the moon, they were very wroth, and they found two of the fiercest of the mighty wolves of Jotunheim, and set them to follow them. And still the sun and the moon, Sol and Mani, are followed by the wolves of Jotunheim. Such wonders did Heimdall with the golden teeth tell Hanessa, the youngest of the dwellers in Asgard. Often the child stayed with him by the Rainbow Bridge and saw the gods pass to and from Midgard. Thor with his crown of stars, with the great hammer Mjolnir in his hands, with the gloves of iron that he used when he grasped Mjolnir. Thor in his chariot drawn by two goats and wearing the belt that doubled his strength. Frigga with her dress of falcon feathers flying swiftly as a bird. Odin, Allfather himself, riding upon Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed, clad in all golden armour, with his golden helmet, shaped like an eagle upon his head, and with his spear Gungnir in his hand. Heimdall kept his horn in the branch of a great tree. This tree was called Yggdrasil. He told little Hanessa that it was a wonder to gods and men. No one knows of a time when Yggdrasil was not growing, and all are afraid to speak of the time it will be destroyed. Yggdrasil has 3 roots. One goes deep under Midgard, another goes deep under Jotunheim, and the third grows above Asgard. Over Odin's hall a branch of the tree grows, and it is called the Peace Bough. You see the tree, little Hanessa, but you do not know all the wonders of it. Far up in its branches 4 stags graze. They shake from their horns the water that falls as rain upon the earth. On the topmost branch of the tree, the branch that is so high that the gods themselves can hardly see it, there is an eagle that knows all things. Upon the beak of his eagle a hawk is perched, a hawk that sees what the eyes of the eagle may not see. The root of the tree that is in Midgard goes deep to the place of the dead. Here there is an evil dragon named Nidhogg that gnaws constantly at the root, striving to destroy the tree of trees. And Ratatosk, the squirrel of mischief, behold him now, runs up and down the tree, making trouble between the eagle above and the dragon below. he goes to tell the dragon how the eagle is bent upon tearing him to pieces, and goes back to tell the eagle how the dragon plans to devour him. The story that he brings to Nidhogg make the evil dragon more fiercely want to destroy the Tree of Trees, so that he may come upon the eagle and devour him. There are two wells by the roots of the tree, and one is above and one is below. One is beside the root that grows in Jotunheim. This is a well of knowledge, and it is guarded by old Mimir the Wise. Whoever drinks out of this well knows of all things that will come to be. The other well is by the root that grows above Asgard. No one may drink out of this well. The three sisters that are holy Norns guard it, and they take the white water from it to water the Tree of Trees, that the Tree of Life may keep green and strong. This well, little Hanessa, is called Urda's well, and little Hanessa heard that by Urda there were two beautiful white swans that made a music that the dwellers of Asgard often heard, but Hanessa was too young to hear the music that was made by the swans of Urda's well. The All-Father's Forebodings. How he leaves Asgard. Two ravens had Odin All-Father. Hugin and Munin were their names. They flew through all the worlds every day, and coming back to Asgard, they would light on Odin's shoulders and tell him of all the things they had seen and heard. And once a day passed without the ravens coming back. Then Odin, standing on the watchtower, Hildiskarf, said to himself, I fear me for Hugin, lest he come not back, but I watch more for Munin. A day passed and the ravens flew back. They sat one on each of his shoulders. Then did the All-Father go into the council hall that was beside Glasir, the wood that had leaves of gold, and to hearken to what Hugin and Munin had to tell him. They told him only of shadows and forebodings. Odin All-Father did not speak to the dwellers in Asgard of the things they told him, but Frigga his queen saw in his eyes the shadows and forebodings of things to come. And when he spoke to her about these things, she said, Do not strive against what must take place. Let us go to the holy Norns who sit by Urda's well and see if the shadows and the forebodings will remain when you have looked into their eyes. And so it came that Odin and the gods left Asgard and came to Urda's well, where, under the great root of Yggdrasil, the three Norns sat, and the two fair swans below them. Odin went, and Tyr, the great swordsman, and Baldur, the most beautiful and the most beloved of the gods, and Thor with his hammer. A rainbow bridge went from Asgard and the city of the gods to Midgard, the world of men. But another rainbow bridge, more beautiful and more tremulous still, went from Asgard to the root of Yggdrasil, under which was Urda's well. This rainbow bridge was seldom seen by men, and where the ends of the two rainbows come together, Heimdall stood. Heimdall with the golden teeth, the watcher for the gods, and the keeper of the way to Urda's well. Open the gate, Heimdall, said the All-Father. Open the gate, for today the gods would visit the holy Norns. Without a word, Heimdall opened wide the gate that led to the bridge, more coloured and more tremulous than any rainbow seen from earth. Then did Odin and Tyr and Baldur step out on the bridge. Thor followed, but before his foot was placed on the bridge, Heimdall laid his hand upon him. The others may go, but you may not go that way, Thor, said Heimdall. What? Would you, Heimdall, hold me back? Said Thor. Yes, for I am the keeper to the Norns, said Heimdall. You, with the mighty hammer you carry, are too weighty for this. The bridge I guard would break under you, Thor with the hammer. Nevertheless, I will go visit the Norns with Odin and my comrades, said Thor. But not this way, Thor, said Heimdall. I will not let the bridge be broken under the weight of you and your hammer. Leave your hammer here with me, if you would go this way. No, no, said Thor. I would not leave in anyone's charge the hammer that defends Asgard, and I will not be turned back from going with Odin and my comrades. There is another way to Urda's well, said Heimdall. Behold, these two great crowd rivers, Cormont and Ermont. Canst thou wade through them? They are cold and suffocating, but they will bring thee to Urda's well, where sit the three holy Norns. Thor looked out onto the two great rolling rivers of cloud. It was a bad way for one to go, cold and suffocating, yet if he went that way he could keep on his shoulder the hammer which you would not leave in another's charge. He swept out into the cloud river that flowed by the rainbow bridge, and with his hammer upon his shoulder he went struggling unto the other river. Odin, Tyr and Baldur were beside Urda's well when Thor came struggling out of the cloud river, wet and choking, but with his hammer still upon his shoulder. There stood Tyr, upright and handsome, leaning on his sword that was inscribed all over with magic runes. There stood Baldur, smiling with his head bent as he listened to the murmur of the two fair swans. And there stood Odin All-Father, clad in his blue cloak fringed with golden stars, without the eagle helmet upon his head, and with no spear in his hands. The three Norns, Urda, Verdani, and Skaldar, sat beside the well that was in the hollow of the great root of Yggdrasil. Urda was ancient, and with white hair, and Verdani was beautiful, while Skaldar could hardly be seen, for she sat far back, and her hair fell over her face and eyes. Urda, Verdani, and Skaldar, they knew the whole of the past, the whole of the present, and the whole of the future. Odin, looking on them, saw into the eyes of Skaldar even. Long, long he stood looking at the Norns with the eyes of a god, while the others listened to the murmur of the swans and the falling of the leaves of Yggdrasil into Urda's well. Looking into their eyes, Odin saw the shadows and forebodings that Hugin and Munin told to him that were to take shape and substance. And now others came across the rainbow bridge. They were Frigga and Sif and Nanna, the wives of Odin, Thor, and Baldur. Frigga looked upon the Norns. As she did, she turned a glance of love and sadness upon Baldur, her son, and then she drew back and placed her hand upon Nanna's head. Odin turned from gazing on the Norns and looked upon Frigga, his queenly wife. "I would leave Asgard for a while, wife of Odin," he said. "Yes," said Frigga, "much has to be done in Midgard, the world of men." "I would change what knowledge I have into wisdom," said Odin, "so that the things that are to happen will be changed into the best that may be." "You would go to Myrmir's well," said Frigga. "I would go to Myrmir's well," said Odin. "My husband, go," said Frigga. Then they went back over that rainbow bridge that is more beautiful and more tremulous than the one that they had seen from the earth. They went back over the rainbow bridge, the Azure and the Esnir, Odin and Frigga and Baldur and Nanna, Tyr with his sword and Sif beside Tyr. As for Thor, he went struggling through the cloud rivers, Cormont and Ermont, his hammer Mjolnir upon his shoulder. Little Hanessa, the youngest of the dwellers in Asgard, was there, standing beside Heimdall, the watcher for the gods and the keeper of the bridge stirred as well, when Odin Allfather and Frigga his queen went through the great gate with heads bent. "Tomorrow," Hanessa heard Odin say, "tomorrow I shall be Bedtime the Wanderer upon the ways of Midgard and Jotunheim." Part 2. Odin the Wanderer. Odin goes to Myrmir's well, his sacrifice for wisdom. And so Odin, no longer riding on Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed, no longer wearing his golden armour and eagle helmet, and without even his spear in his hands, travelled through Midgard, the world of men, and made his way towards Jotunheim, the realm of the giants. No longer was he called Odin, Allfather, but Bedtime the Wanderer. He wore a cloak of dark blue, and he carried a traveller's staff in his hands. And now he went towards Myrmir's well, which was near to Jotunheim. He came upon a giant, riding on a great stag. Odin seemed a man to men, and a giant to giants. He went beside the giant on the great stag, and the two talked together. "Who art thou, O brother?" Odin asked the giant. "I am Vafthrudner, the wisest of the giants," said the one who was riding on the stag. Odin knew him then. Vafthrudner was indeed the wisest of the giants, and many went to strive to gain wisdom from him. But those who went to him had to answer the riddles Vafthrudner asked, and if they failed to answer the giant, he took their heads off. "I am Bedtime the Wanderer," Odin said, "and I know who thou art, O Vafthrudner. I would strive to learn something from thee." The giant laughed, showing his teeth. "Ho, ho," he said, "I am ready for a game with thee. Dost thou know the stakes? My head to thee if I cannot answer any question thou wilt ask, and if thou canst not answer any question that I may ask, then thy head goes to me. Ho, 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 and now let us begin." "I am ready," Odin said. "Then tell me," said Vafthrudner, "tell me the name of the river that divides Asgard with Jotunheim." "Ifling," is the name of the river, said Odin. Ifling, that is dead cold, yet never frozen. Thou hast answered rightly, O wanderer, said the giant, but thou hast still to answer other questions. What are the names of the horses that day and night drive across the sky? Skinfax and Hrimfax, Odin answered. For Alfreda was startled to hear one say the names that were known only to the gods and to the wisest of the giants. There was only one question now that he might ask before it came to the stranger's turn to ask him questions. Tell me, said Valthrednir, what is the name of the plain on which the last battle will be fought? The plain of Vigard, said Odin, the plain that is 100 miles long and 100 miles across. It was now Odin's turn to ask Valthrednir questions. What will be the last words that Odin will whisper into the ear of Baldur, his dead son, he asked. Very startled was the giant Valthrednir at that question. He sprang to the ground and looked at the stranger keenly. The giant laughed, showing his teeth. Ho, ho, he said, I am ready for a game with thee. Dost thou know the stakes? My head to thee, if I cannot answer any question thou wilt ask. And if thou canst not answer any question that I may ask, then thy head goes to me. Ho, 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 and now let us begin. I am ready, Odin said. Then tell me, said Valthrednir, tell me the name of the river that divides Asgard with Jotunheim. Ifling is the name of the river, said Odin. Ifling, that is dead cold, yet never frozen. Thou hast answered rightly, O wanderer, said the giant, but thou hast still to answer other questions. What are the names of the horses that day and night drive across the sky? Skinfax and Hrimfax, Odin answered. For Alfreda was startled to hear one say the names that were known only to the gods and to the wisest of the giants. There was only one question now that he might ask before it came to the stranger's turn to ask him questions. Tell me, said Valthrednir, what is the name of the plain on which the last battle will be fought? The plain of Vigard, said Odin, the plain that is 100 miles long and 100 miles across. It was now Odin's turn to ask Valthrednir questions. What will be the last words that Odin will whisper into the ear of Baldur, his dead son, he asked. Very startled was the giant Valthrednir at that question. He sprang to the ground and looked at the stranger keenly. Only Odin knows what his last words to Baldur will be, he said, and only Odin would have asked that question. Thou art Odin, O wanderer, and thy question I cannot answer. Then said Odin, if thou wouldst keep thy head, answer me this. What price will Mimir ask for a draught from the well of wisdom that he guards? He will ask thy right eye as a price, O Odin, said Valthrednir. Will he ask no less a price than that, said Odin. He will ask no less a price. Many have come to him for a draught from the well of wisdom, but no one yet has given the price Mimir asks. I have answered thy question, O Odin. Now give up thy claim to my head, and let me go on my way. I give up my claim to thy head, said Odin. Then Valthrednir, the wisest of the giants, went on his way, riding on his great stag. It was a terrible price that Mimir would ask for a draught from the well of wisdom, and very troubled was Odin All-Father when it was revealed to him, his right eye, for all time to be without the sight of his right eye. Almost he would have turned back to Asgard, giving up his quest for wisdom. He went on, turning neither to Asgard nor to Mirmir's well, and when he went towards the south, he saw Muspelheim, where stood Surtur with the flaming sword, a terrible figure who would one day join the giants in the war against the gods. And when he turned north, he heard the roaring of the cauldron, Helfgumr, as it poured itself out of Niflheim, the place of darkness and dread. And Odin knew that the world must not be left between Surtur and who would destroy it with fire, and Niflheim that would gather it back to darkness and nothingness. He, the eldest of the gods, would have to win the wisdom that would help to save the world. And so, with his face stern, in front of his loss and pain, Odin All-Father turned and went towards Mirmir's well. It was under the great root of Yggdrasil, the root that grew out of Jotunheim, and there sat Mimir, the guardian of the well of wisdom, with his deep eyes bent upon the deep water. And Mimir, who had drunk every day from the well of wisdom, knew who it was that stood before him. "Hail, Odin, eldest of the gods," he said. Then Odin made reverence to Mimir, the wisest of the world's beings. "I would drink from your well, Mimir," he said. "There is a price to be paid. All who have come here to drink have drunk from paying that price. Will you, eldest of the gods, pay it?" "I will not shrink from the price that has to be paid, Mimir," said Odin All-Father. "Then drink," said Mimir. He filled up a great horn with water from the well and gave it to Odin. Odin took the horn in both his hands and drank, and as he drank, all the future became clear to him. He saw all the sorrows and troubles that will fall upon men and gods, but he saw too why the sorrows and troubles had to fall, and he saw how they might be borne, so that gods and men, by being noble in the days of sorrow and trouble, would leave in the world a force that one day, a day that was far off indeed, would destroy the evil that brought terror and sorrow and despair into the world. Then, when he had drunk out of the great horn that Mimir had given him, he put his hand to his face and he plucked out his right eye. Terrible was the pain that Odin All-Father endured, that he made no groan nor moan. He bowed his head and put his cloak before his face, as Mimir took the eye and let it sink deep, deep into the water of the well of wisdom. And there the eye of Odin stayed, shining up through the water, a sign to all who came to that place of the price that the Father of the gods had paid for his wisdom.